Welcome back and Merry Christmas. In this week's podcast, we're going to be keeping it nice and light. So stay tuned, we're going to be talking about documentation and how to document an erroneous vital sign. So a couple of days ago, I posted up a poll onto my CritMedic Facebook page, which I didn't really expect to receive that much interaction and attention to, but it did. So decided we'd do a little brief episode on that. So I posted the question up on Facebook. A paramedic is caring for a patient, and they have a consistent blood pressure of, say, 160/90. And this is done by automatic blood pressure cuff means you've been getting the same blood pressure reading for the entire past 30 minutes of your patient care. And all of a sudden, the blood pressure returns 60/30 with no clinical correlation to the patient's overall condition. They're still talking to you, nothing's changed, they're not complaining of anything new. It just reads erroneously 60/30. In fact, it may even have a little indicator saying that there was some artifact in the signal. So, let's say the paramedic recycles the automatic blood pressure and comes up with 160/90 again. All right, well, that seems to fit the overall trend. Most likely, that 60/30 was not clinically accurate. So what happens afterwards? So you continue the call. Let's say you don't do manual means. Let's forget about how the blood pressure was obtained. You've got a trend of blood pressures and one blood pressure that seems spurious. What do? How do you document that? Well, there's a couple different schools of thought. One school of thought that I've heard people say is that, well, you have to document all the vital signs, even the ones that you know are wrong. The other school of thought is you get rid of the erroneous blood pressures and only use the accurate data that's been obtained. And there's pros and cons and merits to each approach. With the approach of documenting everything at least is out in the open. There's no secret blood pressures, there's nothing that's hidden or not being reported. However, if your agency is uploading from the cardiac monitor, all this data is already included in the back end in the EKG data. So all the blood pressures that come up that don't get read properly or don't even register, those are all included in the EKG log. So when you have this data that's included, if you have anything that contradicts it on the PCR, you might raise some potential legal questions. However, the distinction is that there's lots of things that get reported in the EKG data that we don't necessarily reflect. Let's say that there's a pulse ox of 60 and that didn't happen to correspond with the blood pressure cuff or blood pressure reading at that time. There's a pulse ox of 60. You don't comment on it. Well, why didn't you comment on it? Wouldn't that be normally a remarkable finding? Well, perhaps, obviously, this was not a clinically valid pulse ox reading. You didn't have a good pleth wave with it. Maybe it was not really on the finger properly. But we don't comment on it, and we don't report it. And that's the way that I see it personally, is that we are there to report factual, accurate clinical information as we see it and as we interpret it. As a clinician, you get a lot of clinical information bombarding you from different directions. And it's up to you to determine what is valid, what is not valid, what is, supporting information, and what is spurious information. And that's sort of our role to help paint the overall clear clinical picture. And if someone's really interested in seeing all the data on the back end, well, you can go into the EKG log and you can see right there it is. So it seems that opinion is in the majority. 87% would say that not including that vital sign is reporting it accurately because that's not an accurate blood pressure. Whereas 13% of people say that not including that inaccurate blood pressure, even if it's including a little note saying that it was not an accurate blood pressure, is some sort of falsification of the medical record. So I want to hear from you. I've heard from a lot of the CritMedic listeners. I want to hear from the EMS world listeners and see what you guys have to say. What do you think? If someone doesn't report an erroneous blood pressure, is that a falsification or is that accurately reporting only the real accurate blood pressures? So let me know down in the comments below. I'm curious to see what all of you have to say. So want to keep it nice and late this week and hope everyone can enjoy their Christmas season. Until next week, keep thinking differently.